Every empire thinks it has mastered time, that its wealth, power, and reputation are too mighty to fade. But history always has a way of humbling arrogance. Empires don't simply vanish overnight, they decay quietly from within long before the final collapse. And at the center of every downfall lies the same silent destroyer, money. When money loses meaning, nations lose everything. Rome's story isn't just ancient history, it's a mirror for every modern economy that believes it can bend the rules of value and never pay the price. When people picture the fall of Rome, they see chaos, barbarian warriors crashing through the gates, cities burning, marble statues toppled by fire and fury. They imagine emperors betrayed, generals fleeing, and the mighty legions scattered. But that's the visible end, the cinematic finale of a tragedy that began long before the swords were drawn. The truth is more subtle, more human. Rome didn't collapse only because of enemies or corruption. It collapsed because of something far quieter, a slow-motion financial death. And the tool of that destruction was its own currency. For centuries, Rome's economy was built on trust, and that trust was stamped into every coin, the denarius, the shining silver heart of Roman power. First minted around 201 BC, it was almost pure silver and carried the image of the state itself. Soldiers received it for their service, merchants weighed it before every trade, and families saved it for generations. The denarius wasn't just metal, it was belief, a small, tangible symbol that Rome's promises were good as gold or in this case silver. The empire's confidence was literally in people's hands. As long as they believed in the strength of Rome, they believed in the value of its coin. But that belief came with a cost, and maintaining an empire that stretched from Britain to Syria wasn't cheap. Roads, fortresses, temples, and an army of hundreds of thousands all demanded endless streams of silver. And when wars multiplied and borders expanded, expenses exploded. By the 2nd century AD, Rome's treasury was cracking under its own ambition. Tax revenues couldn't keep pace with spending. Emperors faced a cruel choice: tax their citizens into revolt or find another way to conjure wealth. And like so many rulers before and after them, they chose the easy road, they diluted the money itself. This process, known as debasement, is economic alchemy, turning trust into illusion. Instead of raising taxes, emperors quietly reduced the silver content in each denarius. Fewer precious metals, more cheap bronze and copper. It was financial deception dressed in imperial dignity. Under Augustus, the denarius was 95% silver, a coin of real weight and honor. By the reign of Caracalla in the early 3rd century, it had fallen to around 50%. A few decades later, under Gallienus, the silver content had nearly vanished, less than 5%. What had once been a coin of value became a token of pretense, a disc of bronze thinly coated in silver wash. Rome's money looked the same, but it felt different, lighter, hollower, fake. And the people noticed, you can't deceive touch and you can't legislate faith. When the denarius lost its luster, Rome lost its anchor. Inflation didn't just rise, it roared. Prices spiraled out of control. Bread, oil, grain, cloth, the basics of daily life doubled, tripled, then multiplied beyond reach. A sack of wheat that once cost a single denarius might now cost 50. Soldiers, desperate to survive, demanded higher pay. Merchants stopped accepting imperial coins altogether, turning instead to barter or gold. Rural trade reverted to direct exchange, goods for goods, because money had become meaningless. The government, blind with panic, struck more coins, flooding the empire with metal no one trusted. It's a cycle history repeats again and again. When real value disappears, leaders compensate with volume. And the more they print, the faster faith collapses. Then came the storm, the crisis of the 3rd century. Between 235 and 284 AD, the Roman world became almost unrecognizable. 50 years of plague, invasion, and civil war tore through the empire. In some years, multiple emperors ruled and died before the harvest even came. But behind every rebellion, every famine, every assassination was the same cause: broken money. Taxes demanded and worthless coins pushed farmers off their land. Soldiers turned against the state when their pay bought nothing. Trade routes disintegrated. The empire that once united the Mediterranean through commerce was now strangled by distrust. The emperors tried everything: price controls, rationing, laws forcing sons to inherit their father's job so labor wouldn't vanish. In 301 AD, Emperor Diocletian issued his infamous edict on maximum prices, setting fixed limits on more than 1,000 goods, from grain to shoes to daily wages. To violate the price ceiling was a crime punishable by death. But even death couldn't stop inflation. You can't order stability when your money is dying. The edict failed spectacularly. A vast black market rose in its place. People bartered, hoarded, and hid. The state had lost control of the economy because it had lost the one thing that makes an economy work: trust. Rome finally gave up on the denarius. Around 312 AD, Constantine the Great introduced the solidus, a gold coin of consistent purity. It stabilized trade for a while, at least in the Eastern Empire. The solidus became the backbone of Byzantine finance for centuries. But for the Western Empire it was too late. The collapse of the denarius had already hollowed out Rome's foundations. The legions could no longer be sustained, and merchants could no longer afford to believe. The empire's body remained, but its spirit, its economic soul, was gone. And that's the real story of Rome's fall. It wasn't only barbarian swords or political intrigue. It was the slow corrosion of trust, the invisible decay of money itself. When value becomes illusion, everything built upon it begins to crumble. And here's where the story loops back to us. Every modern nation that believes it can manipulate its currency, inflate away its debts, or print wealth from thin air is walking the same road. Rome thought it could trick its citizens with coins that looked the same but carried less silver. We think we can trick ours with paper, interest rates, and digital numbers on a screen. But economic truth doesn't negotiate. When money dies, prosperity follows. Wealth evaporates, societies fracture, and faith, once broken, takes generations to rebuild. Rome learned that lesson through ruin. If we don't listen, we might have to learn it the same way. Rome may have been the first great economy to destroy itself through the debasement of money, but it certainly wasn't the last. History didn't stop teaching after the empire fell, it simply changed its language. Every inflationary crisis since has been a translation of the same lesson. When leaders try to rewrite the laws of value, those laws end up rewriting the fate of nations. The pattern never changes. Governments spend more than they can afford. They hide the deficit by devaluing their currency. The wealthy move into tangible assets, land, gold, businesses. And the ordinary citizen, who trusts the numbers printed on paper, wakes up to find that those numbers mean nothing. The Roman debasement was only the prototype, the earliest full-scale simulation of financial collapse. Fast forward nearly 2,000 years, and the sound of crumbling trust is just as loud. After World War I, Germany became the new Rome. Crushed under the weight of war reparations imposed by the Treaty of Versailles, the German government made the same fatal mistake. Instead of confronting reality, it printed its way out of it. Marks poured out of the presses by the trillions, each note worth less than the one before. By the autumn of 1923, hyperinflation had turned daily life into theater. A loaf of bread that once cost a single mark now cost 200 billion. People carried wages home in wheelbarrows. Workers were paid twice a day, rushing to spend their money before it lost value by nightfall. Savings evaporated. Pensions dissolved into dust. And as always, those who owned real assets, land, factories, foreign currency, survived or even thrived. The rest were left destitute. Money, once the foundation of society, became a cruel joke. And out of that despair, a demagogue named Hitler rose, promising stability in exchange for obedience. Economic chaos had opened the door for tyranny. Decades later, halfway across the world, Zimbabwe replayed the same tragedy. In the early 2000s, after disastrous land seizures and collapsing agricultural output, its government turned to the printing press as a last resort. But you can't print prosperity. By 2008, inflation reached an incomprehensible level, 89.7 sextillion% per year. Prices doubled nearly every day. A single egg could cost millions by morning and billions by evening. Shopkeepers stopped changing price tags because there was no point. The Zimbabwean dollar eventually died altogether, replaced by foreign currencies like the US dollar and South African rand. Once again, a government thought it could cheat economic gravity, and once again the people paid the price. But these aren't just stories of distant lands or desperate regimes. The Roman pattern still breathes in the bloodstream of the modern financial world, only now it wears a suit and tie. Consider the United States. In 1971, President Richard Nixon closed the gold window, cutting the last tether between the US dollar and physical gold. It was a quiet but seismic shift, the birth of the Fiat age. From that day forward, the value of money rested not on metal, but on faith in the government's word. And faith, like silver, can be diluted. The temptation to overspend, to promise more than could ever be delivered, became irresistible. Over the next 5 decades, debt ballooned to heights the Romans could never have imagined. The money supply exploded, markets soared, and yet the purchasing power of a single dollar shrank to a fraction of its former self. What a dollar bought in 1971 now costs over 6. The design of the bills stayed the same, but the meaning behind them changed. That's how inflation hides in plain sight. Governments rebrand it as growth. They tell citizens they're earning more, even as prices outpace their wages. They sell borrowing as investment, even when the borrowed money funds short-term consumption. They point to rising stock markets as proof of prosperity, even though most of that wealth belongs to a thin sliver at the top. Like the emperors of old, they maintain the illusion that all is well, while quietly siphoning real value from every coin, every bill, every paycheck. But here's what makes our age uniquely dangerous: scale. Rome's inflation destroyed an empire. Weimar's crisis crippled a nation. Zimbabwe's collapse shattered a single economy. Today, the entire world runs on fiat currencies, promises backed by nothing tangible, enforced only by confidence. Global debt has soared past the point of reason, and central banks, faced with every shock, pandemic, war, or market panic, respond with the same ancient spell: print more. Inject liquidity. Inflate the illusion. The difference is that when this illusion cracks, it won't be one country falling, it will be a chain reaction. The collapse won't respect borders. It will ripple through every system tied to the same fragile trust. And when that happens, the people who suffer won't be those who own real assets. It will be the millions who hold their future in salaries, pensions, and savings accounts denominated in promises. So what should you take away from Rome's story and every echo since? First, understand that inflation is never an accident. It is policy, the most effective silent tax ever invented. Second, realize that real wealth doesn't exist in paper or digital numbers. It lives in assets that hold value when money itself burns: land, resources, skills, businesses that produce rather than consume. Third, never mistake stability for permanence. Romans in the 1st century would have laughed at the idea that their silver coins could one day be worthless. Germans in 1913 would have laughed at the thought of wheelbarrows full of cash. Zimbabweans in the 1980s believed their independence guaranteed prosperity. Each time, the laughter ended in ruin. Empires fall the same way they live: slowly, then suddenly. When money ceases to represent truth, society begins to unravel. Contracts crumble. Armies dissolve. Governments lose legitimacy. The barbarians at the gate are never the true cause, they simply finish the job that began inside the treasury. And here lies the real punchline: history doesn't repeat, it rhymes with terrifying precision. If you don't understand those rhymes, history will crush you all the same. The Roman currency collapse wasn't just a story of corrupt emperors or greedy elites. It was about the fragility of money itself, how easily it breaks when abused by power. And that fragility is still with us, woven into the global economy. Because when trust dies, no empire, ancient or modern, survives for long.